most important sections, which is section 7. Now, friends, we all are aware that the taxable event under GST is. Shalin, recording is on. So we all are aware that the taxable event under GST is supply. At the same time, when we have read section 2, we have not identified, we could not find the definition of the term supply. So does it mean that the term supply is not defined in GST law? Section 2, the headings itself suggests that it is definition. The terms which are used in the chapter, the terms which are used in the act, all those terms which requires any clarification or any definition, that definition is important. And those are covered in section 2. Whereas the most important term, which is the taxable event, because that will determine, first and foremost, we need to identify whether the taxable event is there or not. And in case there is a taxable event, then only the question arises whether the liability to pay tax will arise or not, whether the supply or the taxable event is exempt or it is taxable. So therefore, the most important aspect of any taxable statute or any tax statute is the event which accrues the taxability. Then whether the taxability is converted into an exemption or it is not converted, or there is any other benefit which is allowed, is a secondary question. So therefore, the term supply is an important term, rather the most important term to start with GST. And therefore, I'll be requesting each one of you that from today onward, the discussion may be, to some extent, it will go on a serious note. And therefore, please bear with me and please try to be with me with the bare acts. Now, the question which I have posed before all of you and with myself is, when supply term is a taxable event or supply is a taxable event and it is not defined in section 2, does it mean that there is no definition provided in the statute? My humble understanding on this question is, yes, the term supply is not specifically defined under section 2, but the scope of the taxable event, that is the scope of the term supply, is specified in section 7. That will be trying to cover today. And therefore, we can say that section 7 defines supply. Although I am of a different view, there are different views, and I am of a view that section 7 deals with the scope of supply. It does not define supply. And therefore, what all is covered within the scope of this taxable event is what is stated in section 7, but not what the term or the term supply actually means. This is my understanding, that it is not defined. It is only the scope of supply which has been specified in the law. Let me share the chapter, and then we'll start with the statutory provision first. This is chapter 3 of the CGST Act, which is levy and collection of tax. We all are aware that Article 265 simply says a tax cannot be collected without authority of law. So therefore, there has to be a statute. The statute shall provide for an event or an activity or a transaction on occurrence of which the applicability of tax arises or the imposition of tax arises, and therefore the levy arises. And then it says that once the levy is there, then the collection mechanism has to be established. So therefore, most important chapter, it deals with section 7 to section 11. Section 7 deals with the scope of supply. Section 8 deals with mixed and composite supply. Section 9 deals with the levy part. Section 10 deals with the composition levy, and section 11 deals with the exemptions. So therefore, one by one, we'll be covering everyone. So I'm just skipping the summary part of this chapter, which is the opening part in all the chapters of the book. Now these are the statutory provisions. The first portion, 7.1, would be the first table is always the statutory provision in the entire book. So as you can see the definition and the heading, section 7, scope of supply. It is not definition of supply. So therefore, I strongly believe that the term supply per se is not defined. But yes, the scope of supply is provided in section 7. So therefore, we have to rely on section 7 so as to identify whether the activity or the transactions which are undertaken by the person or the supplier is falling within the purview of this scope of supply or not. If it is falling within the purview of this scope of supply, then in that case, we can say that this is supply, and then we need to further determine whether the supply which we have identified is a taxable supply or not. Section 7, subsection 1. It starts with supply includes. I'll go to the statutory part first. This is the statutory provision 7.1.a. Scope of supply. For the purposes of this act, the expression supply includes A. All forms of supply of goods or services or both, such as transfer, sale, transfer, barter, exchange, license, rental, lease, or disposal, made or agreed to be made for a consideration by a person in course or furtherance of business. Now, while reading this plainly, these are the things that we can note down so far as the scope of term supply is concerned. First, it is an inclusive definition because it said that for the purpose of this act, the expression supply is an inclusive definition, includes all forms of supply of goods or services or both. It can be in any form. The supply can be in any form. And then there are few examples which are given as per me: sale, transfer, barter, exchange, license, lease, rental, or disposal. So when we say sale, transfer, barter, exchange, this is pertaining to goods, and license, lease, rental, lease, or disposal. This can be pertaining to the services made or agreed to be made. Either these supplies are made or it is agreed to be made in any form for a consideration. So the another point to be noted is it should be made or it should be agreed to be made for a consideration. If it is not with a consideration, that means without consideration, then in that case it will not be falling within the purview of or within the scope of supply, except Schedule 1. There are certain transactions which are specified in Schedule 1, specifically mentioning that even if there is no consideration, then also it will be treated as supply. But we'll be touching upon that. But for the time being, be with me and try to understand what are the contents. So supply includes any form of supply which is made or agreed to be made for a consideration by a person. So it has to be by a person. The term person definition we have already studied, in course or furtherance of business. So it has to be in course or furtherance of business. Now, as you all might remember, that the term business has been defined. And the term business has been defined in such a broad manner that even a transaction entered into by the person for once, I mean to say, there is no recurrence, there is no repetitiveness, there is no regularity. But even in that case, it is getting covered within the purview of the term business. And therefore, any transaction or any activity in the form of supply, which is for consideration by a person in course or furtherance of such business, in spite of the fact that it is only for one time, it will be covered within the scope of supply. Then there is a subclause double A. I'll go back to the table. There is subclause double A which was inserted with retrospective effect from 1st July 2017. It was inserted by notification number 2039 by 2021, dated 21st December 2021. Clause double A said, in the scope of supply, the activities or transactions by a person other than an individual to its members or constituents or vice versa for cash, deferred payment, or other valuable consideration. That is also covered within the scope of supply. So, what does it say? It says any activity or any transaction which is undertaken by a person who is not an individual but other than an individual to its members. So, it may be an AOP also to its members or the constituents or vice versa, either for cash, deferred payment, or other valuable consideration. That also is to be treated within the scope of supply. So, therefore, the important aspect here is consideration is the most important aspect. If the consideration is there, then only this transaction will fall within the scope of supply. And then there is an explanation to this clause. It says, for the purpose of this clause, it is hereby clarified that, notwithstanding anything contained in any other law for the time being in force, or any judgment, decree, or order of any court, tribunal, or authority, the person and its members or constituents shall be deemed to be two separate persons, and supply of activities or transactions inter se shall be deemed to be a supply. What does it signify, this explanation? As per my limited understanding, this explanation specifies that even if the transaction is entered into by a person for its members, then the argument of mutuality will not hold good. And therefore, they have said that it is overriding any provision which is contained in any other law for the time being in force or any judgment. So there are judgments of Honorable Supreme Court, Calcutta Club Limited, and other judgments which says that in case of mutuality, a person cannot provide a service. A person cannot uh, make a supply to himself or own self, and therefore those judgments which were based on mutuality, by way of this explanation, have been done away with the impact of those judgments, because it clearly says that anything contained in any other law for the time being in force, or any judgment, decree, or order of any court, tribunal, or authority, the person and its members or constituents shall be deemed to be two separate persons, and the supply of activity or transactions inter se shall be deemed to take place from one person to another. So, therefore, it will be presumed that even if it is provided to the members of the person, say, for example, a society is there, and the services are being provided to the members of that particular society. So, even if the concept of mutuality has already been upheld by the Honorable Supreme Court, even if we can argue that this is a case wherein a person cannot provide service to himself, but even otherwise, they are overriding everything. They are saying that whatever is the provision in any other law for the time being in force, or whatever has been adjudicated by different courts, it will be deemed to be two separate persons, and therefore, specifically, the law has provided that in case any such service or any such supply is being made, either for cash or deferred payment or other valuable consideration, it does not say in course or furtherance of business. It simply says अगर consideration होगा, आपका बिजनेस हो नहीं हो, आप म्यूचुअलिटी करते हैं, कुछ भी करते हैं, बट वो एक्टिविटी और ट्रांजेक्शन्स सप्लाई के स्कोप में फॉल करेंगे. दिस इज अ रेट्रोस्पेक्टिव अमेंडमेंट विच इज ब्रॉट इन बाय द Finance Act 2021. So, therefore, it is very important as per me, because पहले जो हम ये क्वेश्चंस और ये जो आर्गुमेंट्स आते थे कि अगर अब म्यूचुअलिटी है, अगर कोई मेंबर अपने सोसाइटी में अपने मेंबर्स को सर्विसेज अगर कोई सोसाइटी दे रही है, so there will not be any taxability or it will not be treated as supply. So now specifically clause डबल ए में इंक्लूड कर दिया. इवन अगर हम डेफिनेशन भी देखते हैं बिजनेस की, तो उसके अंदर भी ये चीज को इंक्लूड किया गया है. बट सिंस देयर वाज एम्बिग्यूटी, so it has been now clarified by the amendment to be an amendment made in the law, and therefore it is now very clear that even if there is any other provision which is helping us that this cannot be treated as two different persons, or if there is any judgment decree of any other court or the tribunal, then also that will not be applicable, and this transaction entered into between the person and its members will be treated as a person as a transaction entered into between two different persons, and accordingly the supply will be hit or triggered, and accordingly the liability of GST will arise. Clause C. The activities specified in Schedule 1 made or agreed to be made without a consideration. So all those activities which are covered in Schedule 1, either those activities are done or about to be provided or supplied, both if for a consideration is automatically included in Clause A. If without consideration but covered in Schedule 1, it will be included in Clause C, and therefore it will be covered within the scope of supply. So therefore, three clauses we have read. One, any supply in the form of sale, barter, license, exchange that we have done, which is made or agreed to be made by a person in course or furtherance of business for a consideration is supply. Two, if a person other than an individual is providing any services or is supplying something to its members, then also it will be treated as supply. Third, the activities or the transactions which are included in Schedule 1, even those supplies are without consideration, then also it will be treated within the scope of supply, and accordingly the discharge of tax liability and all will arise. Clause D has been omitted with retrospective effect from 1st July 2017. What was the provision? Why it has been amended? Why it has been omitted? We'll be discussing while discussing the amendments with effect from 1st July 2017. उसका एक अलग से पूरा कॉलम होता है, एक टेबल है. So while discussing that table, we'll be discussing this. What is the purpose of deletion of this and insertion of subsection 1 capital A? So again, a new section has been inserted from 2018, and this new section is in accordance with the provisions of subsection 1, they shall be treated either as supply of goods or services, supply of services as referred to in Schedule 2. So subsection 1 capital A, let us see the statutory provision. Now, 1A is where certain activities or transactions constitute a supply in accordance with the provisions of subsection 1. They shall be treated either as supply of goods or supply of services as referred to in Schedule 2. Meaning thereby, when any transaction or any activity falls within Clause A, Clause B, Clause C, then the question will arise whether, now it is very clear that this is supply. ये तो clear हो गया कि supply की definition में fall करता है, supply के purview में, scope में fall करता है, Clause A, B और C में fall कर रहा है इसलिए. But question अब ये arise होता है कि whether this is supply of goods or supply of services, because this is the issue which was or which is the resolution proposed by the government, and therefore GST came. Otherwise तो VAT और service tax था, but वहाँ पे ये बहुत सारे confusions थे and बहुत सारे ऐसे transactions थे जहाँ पे VAT और service tax दोनों लगता था. Something cannot be treated both supply of goods or services at the same time. So therefore, to clarify this, to nullify this issue, the government has proposed GST and GST has came in. And Schedule 2 specifies that if any transaction falls within the purview of term supply or the taxable event, then in that case, for determining whether it is supply of goods or it is supply of service, we need to refer Schedule 2. This is subsection 1, capital A. I'm reading for the sake of brevity once again, for the sake of convenience, and you can connect with me what I'm trying to say. Where certain activities or transactions constitute a supply in accordance with the provisions of subsection 1, they shall be treated either as supply of goods or supply of services as referred to in Schedule 2. So either whether it is supply of goods or it is supply of service, that should be determined on the basis of the activity or transaction being covered in Schedule 2. So उसके लिए हम Schedule 2 को refer करेंगे and Schedule 2 जो बोलेगा accordingly will follow that. Subsection 2. It's a non-abstain clause. It says, notwithstanding anything contained in subsection 1, clause A, activities or transactions specified in Schedule 3, or such activities or transactions undertaken by the central government, a state government, or any local authority in which they are engaged as public authorities, as may be notified by the government on the recommendations of the council, shall be treated neither as supply of goods nor a supply of service. So therefore, there are two clauses in subsection 2, which is overriding subsection 1. So even otherwise, even if the activity or a transaction, I'm repeating, even otherwise, we'll have to remember subsection 2. It is very important because it says that even if I'm covered within subsection 1 of section 7, that means within the scope of supply, and the activity or transaction that we have entered into is falling within the scope of supply and therefore taxable event arises. Then also, if I fall within any of these two clauses, clause A or clause B of section 2, I'll be out of the taxability. And therefore, it can be treated as even if I fall within the scope of supply as per subsection 1, but also I fall into any of these clauses, that is clause A or clause B of subsection 2, the taxability will not arise. Clause A says activities or transactions which are covered in Schedule 3. Schedule 3 is a schedule which says that. So now we can go back and try to relate. Which are the three schedules in the Act? Schedule 1 is the activities or transactions which are undertaken without consideration. Even those activities will be specifically covered in Schedule 1, and that will be treated, or that will be part of scope of supply, and therefore subsection clause C of subsection 1 of section 7 specifically incorporates that. Then comes clause B. Schedule 2. Schedule 2 is when it is confirmed that an activity undertaken falls within the scope of supply. Then the question to determine whether it is supply of goods or it is supply of service depends on Schedule 2. So we need to refer Schedule 2. And then comes Schedule 3. Schedule 3 says the activities or transactions which are covered in Schedule 3 are neither to be treated as supply of goods nor supply of services. So specifically उसको expressly उसको आपने taxability से या scope of supply से delete कर दिया. So therefore, subsection 2 clause A says that if any transaction or activity, even though it is falling within subsection 1, within the scope of supply, but if it is covered in Schedule 3, it will be out of the purview of taxability. Clause B. There are certain activities or transactions which are undertaken by the central government or the state government or any local authorities where they are engaged as a public authority. That shall be treated as neither supply of goods or supply of service, provided those public authorities have services which are being provided or supplied by the central government, state government, or local authority are notified by the government on the recommendation of the council. If the government does not recommend, that this is a public authority service, and therefore you are covered into clause B of section 2, section 7, subsection 2, then you will not be covered into clause B. But the moment it is notified by the government on the recommendations of the council, that will be included in clause B, and therefore, even if it is included in section 7, subsection 1, the taxability will not arise, and therefore it will be out of the tax net. So subsection 2 बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट है, नॉन ऑब्स्टेंट ओवरराइडिंग क्लॉज है. आप भले ही शेड्यूल 1 में, शेड्यूल 2 में, सबसेक्शन 1 में फॉल करते हो, आपके सप्लाई के स्कोप में फॉल करते हो, बट फिर भी अगर आप क्लॉज ए और बी में फॉल करोगे तो यू विल बी आउट ऑफ द परव्यू. नाउ मूविंग टू सबसेक्शन 3, subject to the provisions of subsection 1 capital A and 2, the government may, on the recommendations of the council, specify by notification the transactions that are to be treated as a supply of goods and not a supply of service, or a supply of service and not as a supply of goods. So, what does it say? It says that keeping in mind the provisions that we have read in subsection 1, 1A and 2, the government is authorized that on the recommendation of the council, they can notify, they can come out with a notification saying that this transaction, if entered into, although it is in the scope of supply, it is covered in schedule 2 also. But specifically, the government can say that this will be treated as supply of goods and not supply of service, or a supply of service and not as a supply of goods. So let's say कि शेड्यूल 2 में अगर कोई ट्रांजेक्शन आपने एंटर किया और शेड्यूल 2 में वो सप्लाई ऑफ सर्विसेज में है, इवन मेरा व्यू ये है, उन केसेस में भी सेक्शन 3 कैन बी मेड एप्लीकेबल, और वहां पे स्पेसिफिक एक नोटिफिकेशन सेंट्रल गवर्नमेंट ला सकता है ऑन द बेसिस ऑफ रिकमेंडेशन दैट this transaction entered into shall be treated as supply of service and not supply of goods. Meaning there will be an exception to whatever is mentioned, whatever is read by us in section 1 capital A or section 2. That is what is subsection 3, section 7. So friends, this was all about the scope of supply under section 7. Now let us move to the amendments in section since 1st July 2017. So as we have already read from Finance Act 2021, the amendment was there in the form of insertion of clause AA to section 7, subsection 1. Clause AA we have already read, so I'm not reading it again. Then clause B, there was a change. In clause B, the word and was inserted because earlier there used to be 4 clauses, clause A, B, C and D. D was omitted. So C के आगे जो end लगा हुआ था last में, now it has been shifted to B. So therefore, this was the amendment that the word and was inserted. Right? Just give me 1 minute. I think there is some. We have read from this table, there is an error in this table. Clause B is deleted. Clause B is not there. So we have missed reading clause B. Let me read for all of you and try to explain this. Clause B we have missed. This is clause B, which says import of services for a consideration whether or not in course or furtherance of business. So clause A बोलता था कि कोई भी ट्रांजेक्शन जो सप्लाई के फॉर्म में हो, which is made or agreed to be made for a consideration by a person in course or furtherance of business. यहाँ पे import of service अगर आप करेंगे, जहाँ पे consideration होगा, तो whether it is for business or not, whether it is in course or furtherance of business or not, any import of service will be treated as the part of taxable event. और इसलिए import of services पे GST लगेगा. So that is what is clause B. Now, clause B में the word and was inserted, and clause B was import of services for a consideration whether or not in the course or furtherance of business. Clause C में जो and last में था, because clause D अब delete हो गया, तो this end was deleted. So therefore, जो and था, that is deleted. Clause D, it is omitted. So earlier, before the omission, from 1st July 2017, the provision was the activities to be treated as supply of goods or services or supply of services as referred to in Schedule 2. अब आप एक just use the interpretation skills. Clause A says all forms of supply, such as so and so, made or agreed to be made by for a consideration by a person in course or furtherance of business. Clause B said import of service for a consideration, whether or not in course or furtherance of business. Clause C said the activities which are specified in Schedule 1 made or agreed to be made without consideration. Clause D बोलता था कि Schedule 2 को आप रेफर करिए. इसका मतलब ये हुआ कि भले ही आप 1, 2 और 3 में आए या नहीं आए, क्योंकि स्टार्टिंग क्या था, for the purpose of this act the expression supply includes, that means Schedule 2 में जितना भी mentioned है वो सब supply में inclusive है, supply में include होगा. So that was creating a confusion, and therefore it has been now rationalized by amending the law, wherein now it is said that first you fall into subsection 1. सप्लाई के स्कोप में आप फॉल करिए पहले, क्लॉज ए बी और सी में फॉल करिए, तो अब ये पक्का हो गया कि अब आप सप्लाई में है. अब आप डिटरमाइन करिए कि ये सप्लाई ऑफ गुड्स है या सप्लाई ऑफ सर्विस है. देयरफॉर क्लॉज 1 कैपिटल ए वाज इंसर्टेड, व्हिच इज नेक्स्ट. तो फ्रॉम 1st जुलाई 2017 वाज इंसर्टेड, बिकॉज इसके पहले का जो प्रोविजन क्लॉज डी में डाल दिया था, तो इट वाज एन एम्बिगुअस प्रोविजन, बिकॉज अगर वो भी सप्लाई में ही आ जाता है, इफ सप्लाई इंक्लूड्स क्लॉज शेड्यूल 2, then it was creating a problem. So activities to be treated as supply of goods or services as referred to in Schedule 2, how it can be inclusive within the definition or within the purview of supply. So therefore they have excluded this, and now they have said that whatever is there in subsection 1, if it is there in subsection 1, then to determine whether it is supply of goods or supply of service, please refer Schedule 2. And subsection 3 में एक change आया, जहाँ पे subsection 1 and 2 की बात कर रहे थे, वहां पे 1A को इंसर्ट कर दिया, सबसेक्शन 1, 1A and 2, because 1A was inserted. So friends, this is 7.2 table amendments which have been made in the law since the inception of law, that is 1st July 2017. Now relevant notification, third paragraph, third part of this entire chapter would be, entire section would be relevant notifications. 9/2017. 9/2017 we have already discussed that there are certain sections which are made applicable from 1st July 2017. So section 7 is made applicable from 1st July 2017. Then next is 2/2019. So seeks to bring into force the CGST Amendment Act 2018. So 2000 Amendment Act, it came in effect from 1st February 2019. And therefore 2/2019 is the notification which has brought into force the amendments done, and therefore the amendments which are there proposed in 2018 Amendment Act, जो आपके insertions के या omissions के clause D के, वो सब effective हो गए आपके 1st February 2019 से. So if I have to show this, allow me. So this is what is provided. 2/2019. It says the central government appoints 1st day of February 2019 as the date on which the provisions of Amendment Act will be made applicable, and these sections will be effective. So this is how 1st February 2019 was determined. Now next is 39/2021. So it says seeks to notify 1st January 2022 as the date on which the provisions of section 108, 109, 113 to 122 of the Finance Act shall come into force. So 1 जनवरी 2022 से जो अमेंडमेंट आए, तो फाइनेंस एक्ट 2021 के जो अमेंडमेंट आए, दैट वाज मेड एप्लीकेबल फ्रॉम 1 जनवरी 2022। बट हमारे केस में जो हम सेक्शन 7 पढ़ रहे हैं, सेक्शन 7 में इट वाज हैविंग अ रेट्रोस्पेक्टिव इफेक्ट। देन देयर आर नोटिफिकेशंस ऑफ सेंट्रल टैक्स रेट। सेंट्रल टैक्स रेट में अगर आपको ध्यान होगा, तो हमने सेक्शन 7 सबसेक्शन 2 क्लॉज बी पढ़ा था, जहां पे लिखा था कि नॉट विद स्टैंडिंग एनीथिंग कंटेन इन सबसेक्शन 1, क्लॉज ए वाज ट्रांजेक्शंस और एक्टिविटीज कवर्ड इनटू शेड्यूल 3, क्लॉज बी वाज कि अगर कोई ऐसा एक्टिविटीज या ट्रांजेक्शन अंडरटेक कर रहा है सेंट्रल गवर्नमेंट, स्टेट गवर्नमेंट या लोकल अथॉरिटी एज अ पब्लिक अथॉरिटी, then the government on the recommendation of the council may notify certain transactions or activities that this will not be, in spite of the fact that it is covered into subsection 1, it will not be taxable. So 14/2017 वही है, notifying the supplies which shall be treated neither as supply of goods nor a supply of service under the CGST Act. Let us see what the provision is, or what the notification is, sorry. This is the notification. I think it is visible. So now they are saying, if you can see, section powers conferred by subsection 2 of section 7 that we have read, overriding clause or non-abstaining clause, it is now saying that the following activities or transactions undertaken by the central government or state government or local authority in which they are engaged as public authority shall be treated neither as supply of goods nor as supply of service. So meaning thereby, over and above schedule 3, these are the notifications which are issued under section 7 subsection 2, which specifies, which provides that these transactions also undertaken by the central government, state government or local authority as the public authority will be treated as a supply, neither taxable, like, nor it will be treated as supply of goods, not supply of service, and therefore even if it is supply, it will be out of the tax net. And which are those notified services? Services by way of an activity in relation to a function entrusted to a panchayat under Article 243 capital G of the Constitution of India. So if any services or activities being undertaken with relation to a function which is entrusted to a panchayat under Article 243G of the Constitution, then those services will be out of the purview of the term supply, and therefore it will neither be treated as supply of goods nor supply of services. Going back to the chapter. Next is 16/2018. It says notifying a specialized agency entitled to claim a refund of tax paid on notified supplies of goods or services or both received by them under CGST Act. So I believe we'll read this again while reading section 54. So I'm leaving it for the time being. Then comes 25/2019. It is 30th/9/2019, notifying service by way of grant of alcoholic liquor license, neither as a supply of goods nor supply of service. So a government organization, central government, state government, or the local authority, which is granting a license for alcoholic liquor will not be treated as supply, and therefore it will be out of the tax net. If notification has to be seen, let me open up the notification for each one of you and let us have a glance of the same, because I have already announced that we'll be touching upon all the notifications and all the circulars. So it says services by way of grant of alcoholic liquor license against consideration in the form of license fees or application fee or by whatever name called. If this activity is being undertaken by a central government, state government, or local authority as a public authority, then it will be treated neither as supply of goods nor supply of service. Let us move back to the original file. Yes. So these were the notifications, relevant notification. Then there is no relevant rule so far as section 7 is concerned, because this is all about the taxable event. So there cannot be any rule. Then comes circulars. There is one circular, 1/2017. I'll not be covering that. That will be covering at a later point in time. We have already covered that while discussing the provisions of section 123. 11/2017. That says clarification on taxability of printing contracts. So since this is pertaining to a taxability, this will also be read under section 9. But nevertheless, let us try to cover this here itself. Now, this is what is the circular 11/2017 dated 20th October 2017. It says clarification on taxability of printing contracts. देखिए बहुत सारे इसमें एलिगेशंस क्या होते थे कि मैं अपने प्रिंटर को जब देता हूँ मैं उसको एक डिजाइन बोलता हूँ कि भैया ये आप मेरा विजिटिंग कार्ड बना दीजिए, तो उसमें उसका इंक भी उसी का होता है, प्रिंटिंग की सर्विस भी उसी की होती है और वो विजिटिंग कार्ड का मटेरियल भी उसी का होता है. So when there is a printing contract, how to determine the taxability of that, whether it is supply of goods or supply of service? So that was the question before the board, and the board has tried to clarify this by this circular. Let us read this. Requests have been received to clarify whether supply of books, pamphlets, brochures, envelopes, annual reports, leaflets, carton boxes, etc., printed with design, logo, name, address, or other contents supplied by the recipient of such supplies. What does it say? Printed with design, logo, name, address, or other contents supplied by the recipient of such supplies would constitute supply of goods falling under chapter 48 or 49 of the first schedule to Customs Tariff Act, or supply of services falling under heading 9989 of the scheme of classification of services annexed to notification number 11/2017. Where do it fall? Whether it is supply of goods or supply of services? क्योंकि आपने तो अपने लोगो दे दिए, डिजाइन दे दिया, बाकी सब चीजें दे दी, and which is supplied by the recipient. आपने ही वो सप्लाई की, तो ये क्या constitute करेगा? So in this the government says, in the above context, it is clarified that supply of books, pamphlets, brochures, envelopes, annual reports, leaflets, cartons, boxes, etc., printed with logo, design, name, address, or other contents supplied by the recipient of such printed goods. Recipient, it is not supplier, it is recipient, are composite supplies. And the question whether such supplies constitute supply of goods or services would be determined on the basis of what constitutes the principal supply. So therefore, government is trying to clarify कि आपने ये composite supply दी है, अब ये goods है या services, it depends on what is the principal supply. So that we'll read in section 8 also, but let us try to close this here itself. Principal supply has been defined in section 2 clause 90 of the Central Goods and Services Tax Act as supply of goods or services which constitutes the predominant element of a composite supply, and to which any other supply forming part of that composite supply is ancillary. So आपको क्या चाहिए थे? आपको तो विजिटिंग कार्ड चाहिए थे प्रिंट होके. So यहाँ क्वेश्चन ये अराइज होता है कि वो विजिटिंग कार्ड जो गुड्स में आएगा, क्या वो आपका प्रिंसिपल सप्लाई होगा? तब तो ये सप्लाई ऑफ गुड्स में. और अगर आपको डिजाइन चाहिए था, आपने बोला था कि ठीक है मटेरियल आप यूज करो, कुछ भी करो, डिजाइन मेरे हिसाब से रहेगा. सो अगर आपको डिजाइन का पर्पस था, then in that case it will be supply of service. So therefore they are saying what will be the principal supply, according to that it will be decided whether it is supply of goods or supply of service. Therefore it means that even the printing contracts can be subjective one. It can be supply of service also, it can be supply of goods also. Up till now what we have read, जितना अभी तक पढ़ा है. Now let us read further. In the case of printing of books, pamphlets, brochures, annual reports, and the like, where only content is supplied by the publisher or the person who owns the usage rights to the intangible inputs, while the physical inputs including paper used for printing belong to the printer, supply of printing of the content supplied by the recipient of supply is the principal supply, and therefore such supplies would constitute supply of service falling under heading 9989 of the scheme of classification of services. What does it say? जहाँ पे प्रिंटिंग ऑफ बुक पैम्पलेट ब्रोशर्स एनुअल रिपोर्ट्स या ऐसे कोई प्रिंटिंग की बात करते हैं, वहां पे जो कंटेंट है वो पब्लिशर या जिसके पास उसको यूज करने के राइट्स हैं वो प्रोवाइड करता है, और फिजिकल जो इनपुट्स हैं, पेपर है या जो भी है, वो प्रिंटर देता है। सो यहाँ पे हमने कंटेंट को सप्लाई किया और उसने पेपर सप्लाई किया, तो हमारा पर्पस था सर्विस, एंड देयरफॉर यहाँ ये बोल रहे हैं कि सप्लाई ऑफ प्रिंटिंग ऑफ द कंटेंट सप्लाइड, जो मैं कंटेंट दे रहा हूँ वो आप प्रिंट करके मुझे दें। जैसे मैंने आपको एग्जांपल दिया विजिटिंग कार्ड में, आपने अपने कंटेंट दे दिए, नाउ ही इज सप्लाइंग द विजिटिंग कार्ड, उसके मटेरियल भी उसका है, प्रिंटिंग भी उसकी है, सप्लाई भी उसकी, सब चीज है, लेकिन आपको तो सर्विस चाहिए थी डिजाइनिंग की, एंड देयरफॉर supply of printing of the content which is supplied with the recipient of supply is the principal supply, और वो supply of service में आएगा। Now let us go further. It says in case of supply of printed envelopes, letterheads, printed boxes, tissues, napkins, wallpaper etc. जहाँ पे एनवेलप आप प्रिंट करा रहे हैं, लेटरहेड करा रहे हैं, प्रिंटेड बॉक्सेस करा रहे हैं, वो 48 49 में फॉल करते हैं, प्रिंटेड विद डिजाइन लोगो एक्सेट्रा सप्लाइड बाय द रिसिपिएंट, बट made using physical inputs including paper belonging to the printer. Predominant supply is that of goods, and the supply of printing of the content supplied by the recipient of supply is ancillary to the principal supply, because the मेरा पर्पस क्या था? मेरा पर्पस था लेटर हेड, मेरा पर्पस था एनवेलप, मेरा पर्पस डिजाइन नहीं था, सर्विस नहीं था, मेरा पर्पस था एनवेलप लेना, प्रिंटेड बॉक्सेस लेना। सो उस केस में मैं जो अपने कंटेंट सप्लाई कर रहा हूँ वही कंटेंट यूज करके वो एनवलप मुझे दे रहा है, या मुझे लेटर हेड दे रहा है, या विजिटिंग कार्ड दे रहा है, उस सिचुएशन में ये क्लैरिफाई कर रहे हैं दैट इट विल बी ट्रीटेड एज सप्लाई ऑफ गुड्स, बिकॉज द प्रिंसिपल सप्लाई is goods, not services, and whatever is being provided by the recipient is ancillary to the principal supply, and therefore such supplies which constitute supply of goods falling under respective headings 48 or 49. So this is how this circular has been explaining the taxability, the chargeability in case of a printing contract. Going back, next is 16 bar 2017. It says clarification regarding applicability of GST and the availability of ITC in respect of certain services. So before reading this next circular, let us have a break of 5 minutes, and then thereafter we'll read circular number 16 of 2017. Just a break for 5 minutes. Hello friends, welcome back. Sharon, please check whether the recording is on or
Yes,
not.
sir, it is working.
Okay. So friends, let us now discuss the circular number 16 of 2017. Let me open the file once. Yes. On your screen, there is circular number 16 of 2017, dated 15th November 2017. The subject is clarification regarding applicability of GST and availability of ITC in respect of certain services. Now, many persons are attending these sessions. They have their own view, they have their own, what I can say, way of understanding. So couple of them might have a feeling that these are the old circulars why we are referring it today. Everything is some or the other way, in the some or the other way, linked with the intention. And while announcing this series, my intention was not to read only law, but the intention was to read the law in totality. Whatever have been emerging till date in last 6 years, let's try to cover that. And therefore, my endeavor is to try and cover most of the circulars and notifications to the extent possible. उसमें टाइम तो लगेगा बिकॉज बहुत सारे लोगों का ऐसा है कि फिर तो ये कंप्लीट कब होगा. सो आई डू नॉट हैव एनी इंटेंशन ऑफ कंप्लीटिंग दिस. इट मे गो ऑन एंड एट आवर रीजन आवर कन्वीनियंस विल कंटिन्यू रीडिंग दिस. बीच में ऐसा हो सकता है कि कुछ ब्रेक हो जाए, कोई इमरजेंसीज आ जाए, बट विल ट्राई टू कंक्लूड after concluding the entire process. It may take a longer time, maybe 6 months, maybe 1 year. So please be patient. और YouTube पे हम इसको जरूर अपलोड करेंगे so that we have the entire what I can say GST on YouTube, wherein you can refer whenever you want to refer as per your convenience. और उसमें जैसे मैंने कल बोला था कि हम उसमें कोरिजेंडम से ऐड करते जाएंगे जहाँ पे भी कुछ चीज़ें चेंज हो रही हैं, अमेंडमेंट्स हो रही हैं, सो दैट दैट कैन बी लिस्टेड and linked together. Anyways, the board got certain issues which have been clarified in this circular. First issue was that is GST applicable on warehousing of agricultural produce such as tea, that is black tea, white tea, etc., processed coffee, beans, or powder. So coffee beans or coffee powder, pulses, dehusked or split jaggery, processed spices, processed dry fruits, processed cashew nuts, etc. So whether GST will be applicable on these commodities, these products or not. First comment is, as per GST notification 11/2017, which deals with these services, serial number 24, and notification number 12/2017, which deals with exemption. The GST rating, the GST rate on loading, serial number 54 onward, the GST rate on loading, unloading, packing, storage or warehousing of agricultural produce is nil. But यहाँ पे हम specific agricultural produce की बात कर रहे हैं. So let us see what does it say. Agricultural produce in the notification has been defined to mean any produce out of cultivation of plants and rearing of all life forms of animals, except the rearing of horses for food, fiber, fuel, raw material, or other similar products on which either no further processing is done or such processing is done as is usually done by a cultivator or producer, which does not alter its essential characteristics but make it marketable for a primary market. So this is how the agricultural produce has been defined in the notification, that any produce which is out of cultivation of plants or rearing of life forms of animals, except the horses for food, fiber, fuel, raw material or other similar products on which either no further processing is done as it is used कर ले सकते हैं आप उसको, or such processing is done as is usually done by the cultivator or producer, which does not alter its essential characteristics but make it marketable for the primary market. 3. Tea used for making the beverage, such as black tea, green tea, white tea, is a processed product made in tea factories after carrying out several processes, such as drying, rolling, shaping, refining, oxidation, packing, etc., on green leaf, and is the processed output of the same. So they have clarified that tea is not a raw, it's not a cultivated product, it is a processed product. Therefore, thus, green tea leaves and not tea, green tea leaves and not tea is the agricultural produce. उसी को जब आप further process कर देते हैं, it becomes tea. Is the agricultural produce eligible for exemption, available for loading, unloading, packing, storage, or warehousing of agricultural produce? Same is the case with coffee obtained after processing of coffee beans. Similarly, processing of sugarcane into jaggery changes its essential characteristics. Thus, jaggery is also not an agricultural produce. Pulses, commonly known as dal, are obtained after dehusking or splitting or both. The process of dehusking or splitting is usually not carried out by farmers or at farm level, but by the pulse millers. Therefore, pulses, dehusked or split, are also not agricultural produce. However, whole pulse grains such as whole gram, rajma, etc., are covered in the definition of agricultural produce. In view of the above, it is hereby clarified that processed products such as tea, which includes black tea, white tea, etc., processed coffee beans or powder, pulses, dehusked or split, jaggery, processed spices, processed dry fruits, processed cashew nuts fall outside the definition of agricultural produce given in the notification 11 bar 2017 and 12 bar 2017 and corresponding notifications issued under IGST and UTGST or SGST Acts, and therefore the exemption from GST is not available for their loading, packing, warehousing, etc. And that any clarification issued in the past to the contrary in the context of service tax or VAT or sales tax is no more important or relevant. So therefore, this is the clarification that the warehousing of agricultural produces does not include the warehousing of tea, which is processed, coffee, which is processed, jaggery, processed spices, or cashew nuts or grains. For that, the exemption is not applicable, and therefore it will be treated as supply, which is accessible to GST or on which the GST is applicable. Second question is GST applicable on interstate transfer of aircraft engines, parts and accessories for use by their own airlines? एक एयरलाइन से दूसरी एक ही एयरलाइन की खुद की ही हो, लेकिन वो इंटर स्टेट उसको ट्रांसफर कर रहा है इंजिन्स को, पार्ट्स को और एक्सेसरीज को फॉर यूज बाय ओनसेल्फ. नाउ अंडर शेड्यूल 1 of the CGST Act, supply of goods or services or both between related persons or between distinct persons as specified in section 25 when made in course or furtherance of business, even if without consideration, attracts GST. So therefore they are saying schedule 1 mein, it is very clearly said that even if you are registered under section 25 as a separate or registered separately as a distinct person, then also even if there is no consideration, then also it will be attracting GST. It is hereby clarified. So by this I got reminded that schedule 1, 2 and 3 is yet to be covered. So first we'll read this circular, and then thereafter, maybe tomorrow, we'll start with schedule 1, 2 and 3, and then we'll go with the sequential circulars, which we have to cover in section 7. It is hereby clarified that credit of GST paid on aircraft engines, parts and accessories will be available for discharging GST on interstate supply of such aircraft engines, parts or accessories by way of interstate stock transfers between distinct persons as is specified in section 25 of the CGST Act, notwithstanding that. So again, it overrides something. Credit of input tax charged on consumption of such goods is not allowed for supply of service of transport of passengers by air in economy class at GST rate of 5%. So what does it say? It places a restriction. So क्या circular से वो restriction place कर सकते हैं नहीं कर सकते हैं वो एक दूसरा aspect है. We will not go into that. But ये simply कह रहा है कि जो credit है GST का आप जो पे करेंगे, interstate supply of own aircraft engines or spares or accessories for own use, उस पे जो क्रेडिट है वो आपको अवेलेबल रहेगा जो जीएसटी की लायबिलिटी है उसको डिस्चार्ज करने के लिए. सो पेड ऑन एयरक्राफ्ट इंजन पार्ट और एक्सेसरीज दैट विल बी अवेलेबल फॉर डिस्चार्जिंग जीएसटी ऑन इंटरस्टेट सप्लाई ऑफ सच aircraft engines, part or accessories by way of interstate stock transfer between distinct person under section 25. ये तो क्लियर है. बट देन इट ओवरराइड्स. वहां पे एक रिस्ट्रिक्शन डाल रहा है कि आपको आईटीसी कब नहीं मिलेगा. तो इट सेज नॉटविथस्टैंडिंग दैट क्रेडिट ऑफ इनपुट टैक्स चार्ज ऑन कंजम्पशन ऑफ सच गुड्स. ये गुड्स जो आप कंजम्पशन कर रहे हैं चाहे वो पार्ट्स है एक्सेसरीज हैं is not allowed for supply of service of transport of passengers by air in economy class at GST rate of 5%. So जो भी इकोनॉमी क्लास में ट्रांसफर कर रहे हैं ट्रांसपोर्टेशन किया जा रहा है जिसमें 5% की लायबिलिटी दी जा रही है उसके सामने आप ये क्रेडिट को यूटिलाइज नहीं कर सकते हैं. इफ इट इज नॉट प्रोवाइडेड इन द लॉ, जब हम सेक्शन 17 पढ़ेंगे या सेक्शन 16 पढ़ेंगे तब उसको एनालिसिस करेंगे. If it is not provided in the law, such kind of restriction will not hold good. If it is provided in the law, then certainly yes. Next question. Is GST applicable on general insurance policies provided by a state government to employees of the state government, police personnel, employees of electricity department, or students of colleges, private schools, etc., where premium is paid by the state government and where premium is paid by employees, students, etc. So ये simply क्या पूछ रहा है कि GST आपको लेवेबल होगा जो जनरल इंश्योरेंस पॉलिसी है जो प्रोवाइड करता है स्टेट गवर्नमेंट अपने एम्प्लॉयज को, स्टेट गवर्नमेंट के या पुलिस को या इलेक्ट्रिसिटी डिपार्टमेंट को या स्कूल स्टूडेंट्स हैं जो कॉलेजेस के या प्राइवेट स्कूल्स के उनको, जहाँ पे प्रीमियम स्टेट गवर्नमेंट पे करता है वहाँ पे या जहाँ पे प्रीमियम स्टूडेंट पे करता है या एम्प्लॉय पे करता है वहाँ पे. The reply is, it is hereby clarified that services provided to the central government, state government, union territory under any insurance scheme for which total premium is paid by the central government, state government, union territory are exempt from GST under serial number 40 of 12 of 2017. So, कोई भी services which is provided to the government, state government or central government or union territory under any insurance scheme for which the total premium is also paid by the government is exempt as per serial number 40 of notification number 12 of 2017. Further, services provided by state government by way of general insurance managed by government to employees of the state government, police personnel, employees of electricity department or students are exempt by the entry 6 of notification number 12 of 2017, which exempts services by central government, state government, union territory or local authority to individuals. So if any such services or such insurance services are being provided, which is a general insurance by the government agencies to individuals, then it is exempt as per serial number 6 of notification number 12 of 2017. तो इस क्वेश्चन का आंसर है दोनों ही सिचुएशंस में इट इज एग्जेम्प्ट. नाउ लेट्स मूव टू back to the chapter. Next is 21 of 2017. So 21 of 2017 is clarification on interstate movement of rigs, tools and spares and all goods on wheels like cranes. So I think let us do this. कल हम शेड्यूल 1, 2 और 3 करेंगे. अभी थोड़ा सा टाइम है. Let us read this 21 circular number 21. Wait. This is on your screen now. It is dated 22nd of November 2017. It says clarification on interstate movement of rigs, tools and spares and all goods on wheels like cranes regarding. ये भी बहुत बड़ा इशू था कि आज लेट से मेरे पास कुछ ऐसे स्पेयर्स या टूल्स पड़े हुए हैं गुजरात में और मुझे एक कॉन्ट्रैक्ट मिला है लेट से दिल्ली में और मैं यहाँ से लेके जाता हूँ तो उसकी टैक्सीबिलिटी का कैसा रहेगा. दैट वाज द क्वेश्चन व्हिच वाज आस्क्ड एंड देयरफॉर द गवर्नमेंट हैज ट्राइड टू क्लैरिफाई. अब कई जगह ऐसा है कि वहाँ पे उन्होंने कुछ चीज़ें क्लैरिफाई की हैं और बहुत सारे कन्फ्यूजन्स रेज हो गए हैं. सो सिंस our endeavor today is not to go into litigation as a student of law to read the law whatever it provides. Then finally अगर हमको लगता होगा कभी कोई डिबेट करना है, we'll be doing that but not today or not during this course. The issue of IGST exemption on interstate movement of various modes of conveyance between distinct persons as specified in section 25 subsection 4 of the CGST Act 2017, carrying goods or passengers or both, or for repairs and maintenance, except in cases where such movement is for further supply of the same conveyance, was examined and a circular number 1 of 2017 dated so and so was issued, clarifying that such interstate movement will be treated neither as supply of goods nor supply of services and therefore would not be liable to IGST. So this is what they have clarified in 1 of 2017, which I have already specified कि वो हमने पढ़ा है. If not we have read, then we'll certainly cover that. So what does it say? सर अगर आप ध्यान से देखें तो it says carrying goods or passengers or both और for repairs and maintenance. जो आप अपनी कन्वेंस ले जा रहे हो या तो गुड्स और कन्वेंस उसमें ले जा रहे हो, सॉरी गुड्स और पैसेंजर्स ले जा रहे हो या दोनों ले जा रहे हो या रिपेयर एंड मेंटेनेंस के लिए उसको ले जा रहे हो, एक्सेप्ट वेयर द मूवमेंट इज फॉर फर्दर सप्लाई ऑफ द सेम कन्वेंस. एक्सेप्ट जहाँ पे आप उस सब कन्वेंस की फर्दर सप्लाई के लिए आप उसको ले जा रहे हो. इसको एग्जामिन किया था 1/2017 में. देयरफॉर it was said that it will be treated neither supply of goods nor supply of service and therefore not liable to GST. Further, it says the issue pertaining to interstate movement of rigs, tools, and spares, and all goods on wheels like cranes was discussed in GST Council's meeting held on 10th November 2017. And the Council recommended that Circular number 1/2017 shall mutatis mutandis apply to interstate movement of such goods, and except in cases where the movement of such goods is for further supply of the same goods. In such interstate movement shall be treated neither as a supply of service or supply of goods, and consequently no IGST would be applicable on such movements. तो ये अगर आप टूल्स स्पेयर्स कुछ भी लेके जाते हैं और आपका इंटेंशन ये नहीं है कि आप फर्दर उसको सप्लाई करें, तो उस केस में यू कैन वेरी वेल टेक इट ऑफ and there will not be any applicability of tax. But the question arises, क्या ये GST की authorities मानते हैं? To my limited understanding, the answer is no, because आप खुद के यूज के लिए भी अगर आप अपनी कोई कन्वेंस ले जा रहे हैं, कोई गुड्स ले जा रहे हैं, कोई टूल्स स्पेयर्स ले जा रहे हैं, तो they generally ask for the e-way bill. And since I'm not a compliance person, I'm not sure whether the e-way bill is generated for the personal use or not. But the best part would be you generate a challan wherein you say that this is moving from one place to another place and we are registered as distinct person. So ये तो क्लियर हो जाएगा कि आप एक ही हो, आपका पैन नंबर एक ही है, केवल आप for the purpose of execution of certain works or for the purpose of usability of those tools or spares you are taking it off from one state to another state. And since there is no intention of making a supply, there cannot be any taxability. And then you can rely on this circular, which is the circular number 21 of 2017. So this was circular number 2017. And now let us go back once again to this. So let us cover this next one also, 35 of 2018. It says clarification regarding taxable services provided by member of the joint venture to the joint venture and vice versa, and inter se between the members of joint venture. So let us try to cover this today. Thirty-five of 2018. joint venture taxable services provided by the members of the joint venture to the JV and vice versa, and inter se between the members of the joint venture. Now, this is giving a reference of service tax regime. So I'm directed to say that in service tax regime, CBSE circle number so and so issued from file number so and so on 24th September 2014 had clarified that if cash calls are merely transaction in money, then they are excluded from the definition of service provided in 65B clause 44 of the Finance Act. Whether a cash call is merely a transaction in money and hence not in nature of transaction for taxable service, consideration for taxable service would depend on the terms of the joint venture agreement, which may vary from case to case. The circular clarified that cash calls sometimes could be in the nature of advance payments made by members towards taxable services received from joint venture, and that payments made out of the cash call pools by a joint venture towards taxable services supplied from a member or a third party is in the nature of consideration and hence attract service tax. So they have clarified कि अगर advance की तरह से है तो वो service tax करेगा attract. The circular further stated that joint venture being an unincorporated temporary association constituted for a limited purpose of carrying out a specific project within a time frame, a comprehensive examination of various joint venture agreements. At times, there could be a number of inter se agreements between members of the joint venture. Holds the key to understanding the taxation of transactions involving taxable services between the JV and its members and inter se between the members of a JV. Therefore, officers in the field formations were advised to carefully examine the leviability of service tax with reference to specific terms or clauses of each joint venture agreement. Now, this is what they are trying to clarify now. Service was defined in 65B clause 44, carried out by a person for consideration. Explanation 3 to the said definition is stated that unincorporated association or body of persons, as the case may be, and a member thereof shall be treated as distinct person. Now, further it says in point 3, GST is levied on intrastate and interstate supply of goods and services according to section 7. The expression supply includes all forms of supply, then the definition is given and includes the activities specified in Schedule 2 of the CGST Act. Since this is prior to the amendment, this circular, and therefore it is referring to clause D, which is now deleted. The definition business, again it is stating the definition business includes provision of club association. तो clause AA जो insert किया है उसको यहाँ पे cognizance उसको आप ले लीजिए. The term person is also defined and it includes the association of person or a body of individuals, whether incorporated or not in India or outside India. Schedule 2 enumerates activities which are to be treated as supply of goods or supply of services. And it states in para 7 that supply of goods by an unincorporated association or body of persons to a member thereof for cash, deferred payment or other valuable consideration shall be treated as supply of goods. So it will be treated as supply of goods. A conjoined reading of the above provisions of law implies that supply of services by unincorporated association or body of persons to a member thereof for cash, deferred payment or other valuable consideration shall be treated as supply of service. So by conjoint reading, it is saying so. The above entry in Schedule 2 is analogous and draws a strength to the provisions of Article 366(29) capital A clause E of the Constitution, according to which a tax on the sale or purchase of goods includes a tax on supply of goods by unincorporated association or body of persons to a member thereof for cash, deferred payment or other valuable considerations. Therefore, the law with regard to levy of GST on service supplied by member of an unincorporated joint venture to the joint venture or other members of the joint venture, both. मैं एज अ मेंबर कोई ज्वाइंट वेंचर को सर्विस देता हूँ या किसी दूसरे मेंबर को सर्विस देता हूँ, और बाय द जॉइंट वेंचर टू द मेंबर्स या जॉइंट वेंचर मुझे कोई सर्विस देता है, essentially remains the same as it was under service tax law. Therefore, it is clarified that the clarification given by the board circular number so and so of 24th September 2014 in the context of service tax is applicable for the purpose of GST also. It is reiterated that question whether cash calls are taxable or not will entirely depend on the facts and circumstances of each case. Cash calls are raised by an operating member of the joint venture on other members in proportion to their participating interest in the joint venture to meet the expenditure on the operations to be carried out as per the approved work program and budget. Taxability of cash calls can be further explained by following illustrations. These are certain illustrations for explaining the cash calls. A. There are 4 members in the JV, including the operating member, and each one contributes 100 rupees as part of their share. The total amount is 400 rupees collected. Operating member purchases machinery for 400 rupees for JV to be used in oil production. So they have purchased a machinery. Illustration B. There are 4 members in JV, including the operating member, and each one contributes 100 rupees as a part of their share. A total of rupees 400 is collected. The operating member thereafter uses its own machine and performs exploration and production activities on behalf of JV. Now, खुद का machine use करता है. So, what is the position? Illustration A will not be subject matter of GST or service tax for the reason that operating member is not carrying out any activity for other for consideration. But illustration A may the money paid for purchase of machinery is merely in the nature of capital contribution and therefore it's a transaction of money. But what about transaction B? Illustration B, the operating member uses its own machinery and is therefore providing service within the scope of CGST Act. This is because in this scenario, the operating member is recovering the cost appropriated and there is a consideration involved therefore towards machinery and services from the other JV members in their participating interest ratio. So because of this, the taxability will arise. This is what they have tried to clarify, and therefore the explanation or the circular dated 24th September 2014 holds good even for GST. So friends, today we'll be stopping here only. We have read the circular number 35 till circular number 35. From here onwards, we'll be covering up tomorrow, and along with this, we'll also try to cover schedule 1, 2, and 3. Either tomorrow or maybe once we complete the circulars, thereafter we'll go back to schedule 1, 2, and 3, and then thereafter the notifications or anything else if left. So with this, I thank you, each one of you, for being there and making this successful. Thank you.